In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Oak Ridge Heights, life usually moved at a slow, predictable pace. The streets were lined with neatly trimmed lawns, colorful flower beds, and families going about their daily routines. But beneath the surface, calm tensions had been simmering for months. At the heart of the unrest was the Homeowners Association, or HOA, a group that prided itself on maintaining order in the community. Over time, however, their rules had become stricter, more intrusive and increasingly unfair, especially toward minority families. One Saturday morning, Captain Maya Rivers stood outside her modest home, watering the vibrant flowers that adorned her porch. These weren't just any flowers. They held special meaning. Each plant had been carefully chosen to honor her late grandmother, who had passed, the house down to her. To Maya, this garden wasn't just decoration. It was a tribute to her roots, her family, and her journey as a Black woman navigating a world full of challenges. Maya wasn't your typical homeowner. She was a decorated Special Forces operative, though you'd never know it by looking at her. When she wasn't deployed overseas protecting her country, she spent her days blending into civilian life, finding joy in simple things like tending to her garden or spending time with loved ones. Today, she was enjoying some well-deserved peace after returning from a grueling mission abroad. As she worked, two men approached her driveway. They wore uniforms that looked slightly off, ill-fitting jackets, mismatched badges, and boots scuffed, beyond what you'd expect from professional security personnel. One carried a clipboard while the other fidgeted nervously with something tucked into his belt. They introduced themselves as HOA enforcement officers, claiming to investigate a complaint about Maya's landscaping. "Excuse me, ma'am," one of them said, his tone overly formal but laced with condescension. "We've received reports that your vegetation violates our guidelines, specifically these flowers here." He gestured vaguely toward her garden. Maya paused, lowering her watering can. She studied the men carefully, her sharp instincts kicking in. Something felt off. Not just their demeanor, but the way they avoided making direct eye contact. Still, she kept her voice calm and polite. "I'm sorry, but I'm not aware of any violations," she replied. "My garden complies with all HOA regulations. If there's an issue, I'd be happy to discuss it further." The taller man stepped forward, his posture stiffening. "Ma'am, we're here to enforce the rules. You either remove these plants immediately or we'll have no choice but to take action." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Take action? What does that mean exactly?" Before he could answer, the shorter man pulled out a handheld taser, holding it up like a threat. "This is your final warning," he snapped. "Comply now or we'll use force." For most people, seeing a weapon pointed at them would have been terrifying. But Maya wasn't most people. Years of training in high-pressure situations had taught her how to stay composed when others might panic. Her mind raced, analyzing every detail, their body language, the poorly concealed fear in their eyes, the fact that neither man seemed to know how to properly handle the taser. She took a step back, raising her hand slightly to show compliance. But inside, her thoughts were razor sharp. Who are these guys? Why do they think they have the authority to threaten me? And why does this feel so wrong? Her suspicions deepened when she noticed inconsistencies in their story. Their badges didn't match any official HOA insignias she'd seen before, and their explanations grew more jumbled under her questioning. It became clear these men weren't legitimate enforcers. They were imposters, playing dress-up to intimidate residents into submission. Despite her growing frustration, Maya chose not to escalate the situation herself. Instead, she decided to play along, for now. She wanted to see how far they'd push their charade. Little did they know they were walking into territory far more dangerous than they could comprehend. Unbeknownst to the fake cops, Maya wasn't alone. Inside her house, several members of her former military unit were relaxing after their recent deployment. They had come to visit, seeking a break from the chaos of their last mission. Hearing the commotion outside, they quickly sprang into action, ready to back her up if needed. As the tension mounted, the scene outside began drawing attention. Neighbors peeked through their windows, curious about the disturbance. One passerby even pulled out their phone to record the interaction, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. What started as a routine morning in Oak Ridge Heights was rapidly spiraling into something much bigger and much more explosive. For Maya, this moment was about more than just defending her garden. It was about standing up against injustice, exposing corruption, and reminding everyone present, including herself, that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act despite it. The tension on Maya's driveway was thick enough to cut with a knife. The two so-called HOA enforcers stood their ground, though their confidence seemed shaky at best. One of them still clutched the taser like it was some kind of lifeline, while the other fumbled with his clipboard, clearly unsure of what to do next. Maya, on the other hand, remained calm and collected. Years of training had taught her how to read people, and she could tell these men weren't professionals, they were amateurs playing a dangerous game. "Look," Maya said firmly, her voice steady but laced with authority. "I've already told you, there's no violation here. These flowers are part of my property, and they comply with every rule the HOA has set. If you have any doubts, feel free to check the guidelines yourself." Her tone left no room for argument, but instead of backing down, the taller man stepped closer, his face flushed with frustration. "We don't need to check anything," he barked. "You're either going to remove those plants right now, or we'll handle this ourselves." Maya's jaw tightened. She didn't appreciate being spoken to like that, especially not in her own space. Still, she kept her emotions in check. Her military experience had drilled one lesson into her mind above all others: never let anger cloud your judgment. Instead, she focused on the situation unfolding in front of her, analyzing every move the men made. When the shorter man took another step forward, taser raised, Maya realized they weren't bluffing. They genuinely intended to escalate things. That's when everything changed. Without warning, the shorter man lunged toward her, trying to grab her arm. It was a reckless move, one born out of panic rather than strategy. But Maya was ready. In a split second, she twisted her body, using his momentum against him. With practiced precision, she disarmed him, sending the tase skittering across the driveway. Before he could react, she pivoted, pinning him to the ground with a firm but controlled hold. The taller man froze, his eyes wide with shock. He hadn't expected this. To him, Maya was just another homeowner, someone who would back down when confronted. What he didn't realize was that he was dealing with someone far more capable than he could ever imagine. For a moment, nobody moved. The only sounds were the distant chirping of birds and the faint hum of lawnmowers from nearby yards. Then, suddenly, the sound of footsteps broke the silence. Out of the corner of her eye, Maya saw movement near her front door. Her unit, the same team she'd served with overseas, had heard the commotion and come outside to see what was happening. One by one they appeared, each exuding the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of working together under pressure. There was the tech expert, always quick with a solution, the medic whose sharp eyes missed nothing, and the explosive specialist whose imposing frame alone was enough to make anyone think twice. They didn't say a word as they surrounded the scene, their presence speaking volumes. The taller man looked around, visibly unnerved. His partner, still pinned beneath Maya, squirmed uncomfortably. "Let me go," he shouted, his voice cracking. Maya leaned down slightly, her gaze locking onto his. "Not until you explain who sent you," she said evenly, "and why you thought it was okay to threaten me with a weapon over a few flowers." Before he could respond, a dog walker passing by stopped to watch the spectacle. Recognizing the seriousness of the situation, they quickly dialed 911. Meanwhile, Maya's teammates sprang into action. The tech expert retrieved the discarded taser, examining it closely. "Cheap knockoff," he muttered, shaking his head. "These guys are amateurs." The medic knelt beside the man on the ground, checking for injuries. Though she worked efficiently, her expression was unreadable, a mix of professionalism and barely concealed disdain. As for the explosive specialist, he positioned himself between the fake cops and Maya, his arms crossed and his stance unyielding. Anyone looking at him could tell he wasn't someone to mess with. By now, neighbors had started gathering, drawn by the commotion. Some stood on their porches, whispering among themselves, while others ventured closer to get a better look. A few even began filming the scene on their phones, capturing the absurdity of two men in ill-fitting uniforms attempting to strong-arm a woman who clearly knew how to handle herself. When the police sirens finally wailed in the distance, the taller man tried to put on a brave face. "This isn't over," he muttered, though his trembling hands betrayed his bravado. Maya simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. She didn't need to say a word. The truth was written all over her face. You picked the wrong person to mess with. As the officers arrived and began sorting through the chaos, Maya handed over evidence, photos of the fake badges, recordings from her Ring doorbell camera, and statements from witnesses. The imposters were arrested on the spot, their excuses falling flat under scrutiny. It was clear they had no idea who they were dealing with, and by the time the dust settled, neither did anyone else. What had started as a minor dispute over flowers had turned into something much bigger. For Maya, it was proof that standing up for yourself, even in the face of intimidation, could inspire others to do the same. And as the crowd dispersed and the police led the fake cops away, she couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to stand their ground to remind everyone else that justice isn't just a concept. It's something worth fighting for. The arrests of the two fake HOA enforcers sent shockwaves through Oak Ridge Heights. What had started as a tense standoff on Maya's driveway quickly turned into the talk of the neighborhood. Neighbors who had been too intimidated to speak up before now felt emboldened. People began sharing stories of similar run-ins with the so-called HOA security team. Some recounted how they'd been pressured to pay fines for minor infractions, like hanging wind chimes or planting shrubs that weren't on an approved list. Others admitted they'd been threatened with eviction over disputes that seemed trivial. At best, Maya's teammates didn't leave town after the incident. Instead, they decided to stick around for a while, intrigued by the brewing scandal and eager to help uncover the truth. These were people who thrived on solving problems, whether it was dismantling enemy operations overseas or exposing corruption in their own backyard. They knew how to dig deep, connect the dots, and find evidence others might overlook, and that's exactly what they did. The tech expert from Maya's unit took charge of gathering digital proof. He spent hours combing through public records, emails, and financial documents linked to the HOA. It didn't take long for him to uncover something suspicious. Payments made to a private security firm that didn't exist, or at least, not officially. The company had no registered business address, no official license, and no employees listed anywhere. Yet somehow it had received thousands of dollars from the HOA over the past year. Meanwhile, the medic used her sharp observational skills to interview neighbors. She knocked on doors, sat on porches, and listened intently as residents recounted their experiences. Many were hesitant at first, worried about retaliation if they spoke out. But when they realized who she was working with, Maya Rivers, the woman who had stood up to the fake cops, they opened up. Their stories painted a disturbing picture of intimidation and discrimination, targeting mostly minority families in the community. The explosives specialist, known for his meticulous attention to detail, focused on physical evidence. He examined the uniforms worn by the imposters, noting the lack of proper insignias and the cheap fabric. He also reviewed footage from Maya's Ring doorbell camera, frame by frame, identifying key moments that proved the men were acting unlawfully. His findings would later become crucial in building a case against them. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, one name kept surfacing: Richard Grayson. He was the president of the HOA, a wealthy businessman who had lived in Oak Ridge Heights for decades. On paper, he seemed like a pillar of the community, a family man who cared deeply about maintaining property values and keeping the neighborhood pristine. But beneath the polished exterior lay a darker truth. Grayson's plan was simple, yet insidious. By hiring untrained, unlicensed individuals to pose as HOA enforcers, he hoped to intimidate homeowners into compliance, or better yet, force them to sell their properties cheap lieu. As the investigation deepened, it became clear that Richard Grayson wasn't just a bad neighbor with too much power. He was running a calculated scheme designed to exploit fear and prejudice. The evidence Maya's team uncovered painted a damning picture. Grayson had been using the HOA as a front to push minority families out of Oak Ridge Heights. His goal? To buy up their homes at rock-bottom prices, renovate them, and flip them for massive profits. The tech expert found emails between Grayson and the owner of the fake security firm, a shadowy figure who operated under multiple aliases. In one email chain, Grayson explicitly instructed the firm to target specific households, all belonging to Black, Latino, or Asian families. The language he used was chillingly casual, as if he were discussing nothing more than lawn care services. "Make sure they understand the rules are non-negotiable," Grayson wrote in one message. "If they can't comply, we'll find ways to make life difficult." Neighbors who had once felt powerless began stepping forward after seeing how determined Maya and her team were to expose the truth. One elderly woman recounted how she'd been fined repeatedly for having a small vegetable garden in her backyard, something explicitly allowed by HOA guidelines. Another family described receiving threatening letters claiming their children's basketball hoop violated aesthetic standards. Each story added another layer to the growing scandal, revealing a pattern of harassment aimed squarely at marginalized residents. Maya's medic friend played a crucial role in organizing these testimonies. She set up informal meetings in people's living rooms, creating a safe space where neighbors could share their experiences without fear of judgment. At first, many were hesitant to speak openly, worried about backlash from Grayson or his allies. But as more people came forward, a sense of solidarity began to take root. For the first time, these families realized they weren't alone in their struggles, and that gave them strength. Meanwhile, the explosive specialist worked tirelessly. To document everything, he photographed the fake uniforms, cataloged receipts showing payments to the bogus security firm, and even tracked down former employees of the company. These individuals, most of whom had no prior experience in law enforcement, admitted they'd been hired through vague online ads promising easy work and good pay. None of them knew they were part of an illegal operation until it was too late. With each new discovery, the case against Grayson grew stronger. Local news outlets caught wind of the story and sent reporters to Oak Ridge Heights. Cameras rolled as Maya addressed a crowd of neighbors gathered in her driveway, the same spot where the confrontation with the fake cops had unfolded. Standing tall, she spoke with conviction, her voice steady, but filled with emotion. "This isn't just about me or my garden," she said, gesturing toward the vibrant flowers lining her porch. "It's about standing up for what's right, for everyone in this community. We deserve to live here without being harassed, intimidated, or pushed out because of who we are." Her words resonated deeply with the crowd. Cheers erupted as neighbors clapped and nodded in agreement. Someone shouted, "You tell him, Maya," while another held up a sign reading, "Justice for Oak Ridge." It was a moment of unity, a turning point that reminded everyone present why they loved their neighborhood in the first place. The media coverage brought national attention to the issue, shining a spotlight on discriminatory practices within HOAs across the country. Experts weighed in, discussing how such schemes often went unnoticed because victims feared retaliation or lacked the resources to fight back. Others praised Maya and her team for taking a stand, calling them heroes not just for Oak Ridge Heights but for anyone facing similar injustices. Grayson, however, wasn't going down without a fight. When investigators arrived at his doorstep, he denied any wrongdoing, insisting he was simply trying to maintain order in the community. But the evidence was overwhelming. Emails, financial records, and witness testimonies all pointed directly to him. Under mounting pressure, Grayson resigned as HOA president, though his legal troubles were far from over. He was eventually charged with fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy, crimes that could land him behind bars for years. For Maya, the victory was bittersweet. While she was glad to see justice served, she couldn't help but feel anger at the damage Grayson had caused. Families had been torn apart, trust had been broken, and lives had been disrupted, all because one man wanted to line his pockets at others' expense. Still, she refused to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she channeled her energy into rebuilding the community. She rallied her neighbors to elect new HOA leadership committed to transparency, fairness, and inclusivity. Candidates ran on platforms promising to eliminate discriminatory practices, reduce unnecessary fines, and foster a spirit of cooperation rather than conflict. When election day arrived, voter turnout was higher than ever before, signaling a renewed sense of hope and determination among residents. Through it all, Maya remained humble, deflecting praise onto her teammates and neighbors. "I didn't do this alone," she told reporters during one interview. "This was a team effort. Everyone who stood up and shared their story played a part in making things right." As the dust settled, Oak Ridge Heights began to heal. Neighbors, who had once kept to themselves, now waved hello as they passed each other on the street. Community events drew bigger crowds than ever before, bringing people together in ways no one thought possible. And Maya's garden? It became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, beauty could flourish when nurtured with care and courage. Though the battle had been won, Maya knew the war against discrimination and abuse of power was far from over. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of peace, sitting on her porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. The flowers swayed gently in the evening breeze, their colors glowing softly in the fading light. Behind, her laughter echoed from inside the house as her team joked about their next adventure. Life for once felt good. Weeks after the dust had settled, Oak Ridge Heights felt like a different place. The once tense atmosphere that had hung over the neighborhood like a storm cloud had lifted, replaced by a sense of unity and hope. Neighbors who barely knew each other before were now exchanging smiles, sharing stories, and even inviting one another over for barbecues. Maya's porch became a sort of unofficial meeting spot, where people would stop by to chat or simply admire her vibrant garden, the same flowers that had sparked the whole ordeal. For Maya, life was slowly returning to normal, or as close to normal as it could get after everything that had happened. Her team had packed up and headed back to their duties, but not without teasing her about becoming a local celebrity. "Next time, let us handle the troublemakers," the tech expert joked as he loaded his gear into the car. "You're supposed to be relaxing, remember?" Maya laughed, shaking her head. "Yeah, right, like I'd ever sit back and let someone push me around." Her teammates left with promises to visit again soon, but Maya knew she'd miss having them around. They weren't just colleagues, they were family. Through thick and thin, they'd always had each other's backs. Still, she took comfort in knowing that their work hadn't been in vain. Together, they'd exposed corruption, inspired courage, and given a voice to those who had long been silenced. In the weeks that followed, Maya threw herself into rebuilding the community. She attended HOA meetings, offering input on new policies designed to prevent future abuses of power. Gone were the days of arbitrary fines and vague guidelines. Under the new leadership, rules were clearly defined, and decisions were made democratically, with input from all residents. Transparency became the cornerstone of the association, and accountability was no longer just a buzzword, it was a way of life. One evening, the neighborhood organized a potluck dinner to celebrate the changes. Tables stretched across Maya's driveway, laden with dishes representing cultures from around the world. There were spicy curries, savory tamales, fragrant stir-fries, and homemade pies. The air buzzed with laughter and conversation as neighbors mingled, swapping recipes and stories. Kids chased each other through the yard while adults reminisced about how far they'd come. At one point, someone tapped a glass to get everyone's attention. It was an older man named Joe, who had lived in Oak Ridge Heights for decades. He stood up holding his plate of food like it was a trophy. "I've got something to say," he announced, his voice warm but firm. "Before all this went down, I didn't realize what was happening in our community. I stayed quiet because I thought it wasn't my problem. But Maya showed us all that staying silent doesn't solve anything. It only makes things worse." He turned to Maya, his eyes glistening. "Thank you for standing up when so many of us wouldn't. You reminded us that we're stronger together, And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we can't let anyone divide us. Not now. Not ever. The crowd erupted in applause and Maya felt her cheeks flush. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, especially for something she saw as basic human decency. When the clapping died down, she stood up, brushing crumbs off her hands. "Joe's right," she said, looking around at the sea of faces. "We're stronger together. This isn't just about me or my garden. It's about every single person here taking ownership of this community and making it better. For ourselves, for our kids, and for anyone else who calls Oak Ridge Heights home." She paused, letting her words sink in. But let's not forget, this fight isn't over. What happened here isn't unique. Discrimination and abuse of power exist everywhere, in schools, workplaces, neighborhoods. We can't control what happens outside these streets, but we can choose how we respond. We can choose to stand up, speak out, and support one another. Because when we do, we show the world what real strength looks like. Her speech ended with another round of cheers, and soon the party picked up where it left off. People danced to music blasting from a Bluetooth speaker, shared desserts under strings of twinkling lights, and promised to keep fighting for fairness, not just in their neighborhood, but wherever injustice reared its head. As the night wore on, Maya slipped away from the crowd to sit quietly on her porch steps. The stars shimmered above, casting a soft glow over the scene below. She watched as neighbors laughed and hugged, their faces illuminated by lanterns strung between trees. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace. Her thoughts drifted to her grandmother, the woman who had taught her the value of resilience and perseverance. "You'd be proud," she whispered, running her fingers over the petals of a marigold. Then she smiled, remembering the countless times her grandmother had told her. Flowers grow strongest in tough soil. It was true, both for gardens and for people. Life had thrown its share of challenges her way, but she'd faced them head-on, refusing to back down. And now, thanks to her courage and the support of her friends and neighbors, Oak Ridge Heights was blooming again. Inside the house, her phone buzzed with a text from her team. "Mission accomplished, Captain. Until next time." She chuckled softly, typing back, "Couldn't have done it without you." As she tucked her phone into her pocket and leaned back against the railing, Maya allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be setbacks, disagreements, and moments of doubt. But she believed in the power of community. She believed in the goodness of people coming together to create something meaningful. And most importantly, she believed in herself, and in the idea that even the smallest actions could spark big change. The night stretched on, full of warmth and possibility. For Maya, it was a reminder that while battles might end, the journey toward justice never truly did. And she was okay with that. After all, she'd spent her life preparing for exactly this: to lead, to inspire, and to stand firm in the face of adversity. As the lights flickered and the last guests said their goodbyes, Maya knew one thing for certain: no matter what came next, Oak Ridge Heights, and the people who called it home, would be ready.